G'day and welcome to Point Arkwright on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia. It's a bit of turbulent surf behind me there, and just enjoying a little time away out of the comfort zones of my familiar surroundings, which is always good to see where your triggers are and where your what would you call it, inconsistencies can be exposed. And if you're constantly within the framework of your own associations and not allowing for things outside of that frame of reference to at least be able to jostle you about and push your buttons and activate your triggers and all of that sort of thing, you can't really be 100% certain where the truth of your own sense of self and that state of inner peace lies, because you're constantly looking at the same reflections. And whilst one reflection external is exactly the same as another, it's because the mind believes in differences, that there are differences of reflection, that the idea of that healing through forgiveness has to come into play. And there's no better way to be sure of that and to be open to that than by getting out of your comfort zone. So I've driven 1,000 kilometres. I've taken all the advices that have come along the way, and the last advice I had today was, you should go up to Point Arkwright, it's beautiful up there. And so here I am. And it is beautiful up here, and the universe directs all things, so this is where I'm meant to be. Follow the instructions. Very simple. Follow the instructions. You can't get it any simpler than that. So one of the things that I wanted to do while I'm here, that's sort of been coming up a bit, and is to try and make more simple videos regarding the basic premises of salvation, of atonement, enlightenment, which is all the same thing. And if you're a course student, you're probably aware, or a student of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, or Hinduism, if you're a Sikh, perhaps, you'd be aware of the two premises that any true spiritual discipline rests on. One being that there's nothing outside of my own mind, and the second, that time is not sequential. Everything is going on here and now. I should say here and now, finger on the nose. So the idea that time is not sequential is presented through the earlier lessons in the course, and of course all through the text, that there is only this moment, that everything else gone by, or that seems to have gone by, is just an idea of the past, which represents memories, and what of course exists in the future is yet to be determined, yet to come, all of that sort of thing. And so life is actually happening to you now. You can dwell on the past and anticipate the future, but you won't experience life by doing so, because your mind can only focus on one state at a time. And time and the present are two different states of mind. One of those, I'm in a kind of an astral or a daydreaming state, if you want to look at it like that, where I'm not really present with what's going on here. And the other one, of course, I'm in the present, and I'm completely focused and awake to my situation in this moment. So the idea that there is nothing outside of my own mind might be a little more difficult to present. And it's not that there's any difficulty that the miracle can't take care of, but in the outset, when you're looking at the idea of becoming miracle-minded, it can take a moment of getting out of your comfort zone and learning to become completely dependent upon higher power, or God, or higher consciousness, whatever you want to call that, as an interceding, a requested intercession, that might be better, a requested intercession in a place where using the past of our learnings or the future of learnings might be something that we tend to want to fall back on, rather than asking for guided spiritual direction here and now. One of the things that you'll notice when you begin to look at the way you think is the circular nature of your thinking. It'll show up again and again, and perhaps in different forms, different people, different shapes, but you'll recognise the nature of your own thinking by your triggers. You'll recognise that something annoys you or upsets you, and the tendency will want to be to point the finger at someone or something. But of course, as above so below, I'm one with all things on earth as I am with all things in eternity, in the singular state. Being one with all things here necessitates that whatever disturbs me is simply a projection of my mind out there, or whatever I think might bring me satisfaction and joy, in the denial of the whole state within that exists within already. So I become more vigilant. I become more aware for the externalizing of my denial, which can show up as things that make me happy, or things I think make me happy, or things I think make me sad, or sick, or healthy, or any of the opposites that show up in time and space, which is what time and space reflects. The opposites, or the duality of the nature of the split mind that believes in man as separate from God, rather than I am that. So I have relationships with all things on earth, and each individual relationship plays a part as a reflection, a symbolic reflection of my relationship with the whole, because God is everything, Spirit is everything. But in my human concept, I divide my relationships up and give them value and meaning according to what I think they bring to me and can offer me. So one becomes more or less important than others, and by that I divide myself up as an awareness of myself identity as a Dave, let's say, rather than as a spirit, and I get the results of that, which is going to be pain, suffering and death. Anything other than a whole state or a whole-minded perspective of myself and the world is representing what the opposite of the whole is. Now, if the whole is love, and I can either see through the eyes of love or the eyes of fear, then anything that's not representing the whole to me is going to be representing my fear. And you might say to me, well, how can my fear be represented through things I think I like and things I think I love? And it's like, remember that in this world everything is the yin and the yang of each other, and the bad follows the good as surely as the good follows the bad. So I look at my world and my externalizing of value, and I see that I don't want to externalize value anymore. I don't want to give anything a meaning. I want to find love within myself and learn to love myself completely first, and know what that is within myself, so that I can then begin to extend from that sense of self, that sense of love which is unconditional to the world that I seem to see around me, as my state of mind, not as a physical expression, although it may occur that way, it may look that way, but as my state of mind, which automatically transfers to everyone and everything. And it's funny, you'll begin to see, when you step out of your comfort zone, you'll begin to see where that plays out more than in the nature of your comfort zones, because familiarity breeds contempt. And very simply, you won't become aware of the nature of the expression of self so clearly in a cloistered environment of comfort, because of the contempt you have for it. Right? Now, I say contempt because what isn't love is fear, and what isn't love is murder, and all of that sort of thing. You can go to that extreme, and it's symbolically representing the contempt for your creative source, the denial. And you'll be saying to me, well, that's a lot of rubbish, I don't believe in all that. But you can very simply prove it to yourself the next time you find a trigger. Am I at peace here, or is there a trigger? Well, if there's a trigger, where is that trigger occurring? Am I going to try and change every person in the world that triggers me so that I'm no longer triggered by whatever it is I'm calling it? Or am I going to change my mind about it? It's very, very easy and simple to prove that I'm either in the experience of love as being unconditional or I'm not. There's no grey area. It's either one or the other. Your mind cannot be slightly at peace. It's either all at peace or nothing. There's no such thing as peace on a battlefield. If even two people are still fighting on that battlefield, there's still no peace. So this morning I had a good one. I was at some little cafe on a lake. I camped at a little campground near this lake last night, and this morning I thought, well, I'll go and get breakfast somewhere. I didn't know anywhere. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. I drove past this place, Coffee Tribe, and at Lake Catharaba, maybe, might have been. Coffee Tribe. So I turned the truck around and pulled in there. Thought, all right, I'll just go in there. I like the idea of tribe. It seemed to resonate on some kind of biblical level in my mind. So I thought, I'll go there. It's as good as anything. And I've given it all the meaning it has for me. So I wound up at this place, and there's 3 or 4 other fellas about my age on this long bench out the front, each with as many grey whiskers. And I pulled my chair up there, ordered my meal and for breakfast and coffee, and pulled my chair up there and just listened to the conversation going on between these other fellas. And it wasn't long before I was drawn into it. But just in the listening, just in the witnessing, there was a light-hearted joy and a happiness amongst the conversation, amongst the participants. There was a camaraderie and a brotherhood. That's how it appeared to me. It didn't matter what the conversation was, it was the heart space that was being presented and the love that was being expressed through that light-hearted banter and willingness to join, even though joining is not of the form, it is of the mind. In my mind, I was able to recognize my own sense of what that was representing to me. There was no trigger. There was simply a happiness and a peace that come from a recognition of the spirit within, a recognition of that playful spirit and that happy spirit and that peaceful spirit. And I was very grateful for that inner direction that led me to that moment and that very nice breakfast and coffee and everything like that. And it's that simple. It's that simple. Anyway, watch the reflections you get, and be honest about them. You know, there are many parables and many teachings that combine as, let's say, tools in the psychological toolbox on this journey that will help you to recognize where you are at if you're willing to follow the instructions. It will help you to recognize what it is you're actually looking at and actually being presented with, rather than trusting your own thoughts on the subject matter, in the recognition that my thoughts don't mean anything. I'll just turn up, I just listen, I just allow, I just let down all the defenses and be magnificently vulnerable wherever I go, and the truth of my nature will be presented through whatever I react to. And if that reaction is fearful, then I still have work to do. If that reaction is from fear, then the idea of hatred, jealousy, pettiness and all of those sorts of things will show up in my witnessing. But otherwise, if there is just a peaceful and a inclusive, let's say, or altruistic would be better, altruistic sense of self presented, then everything is a blessing. And you can look at life as either a blessing or a lesson, and if you're still getting triggered, then you have to put your finger on your own nose and look for the blocks that trigger will point you to. You know, the blocks are quite very simply, and this is on the path to salvation. We're not talking about a happy life in the world. We're talking about give up the world and follow me. On the path to salvation, the blocks can be seen through 4 distinct kinds of reflections. One being the desire to get rid of peace, which takes a moment to recognize, because you've probably been following the heart and been telling yourself that you do want peace and you do want love, and any reflection that is reflecting back to you a disparity there is going to be unwelcomed because of the amount of effort you've put into convincing yourself to the contrary. So there's the desire to get rid of it, the belief that the body is valuable for what it can offer, the fear of death, and the fear of love. And each of those triggers owned, each of those triggers taken responsibility for, will reflect off one or other of those blocks. Seen rightly, one of those blocks is all of those blocks, but just to be able to perceive the changing consciousness, or the nature of changing consciousness, it's helpful to have specifics to show up so you can see your honesty regarding the block the next time it comes around, or if it comes around again. You'll get to see how honest you were with the prayer of the heart for the healing of the mind that believes in separation from source, which shows up as the belief through the block, of course, through the trigger. The singular state of consciousness on earth is perfect inner peace, and that singular state has to marry up and match up with the singular state of consciousness of the I am, which is the extension of the light of God, which is also in your mind. And when those two singular states, the altruistic state of peace and the singular state of I am, line up, they kind of lock together, and you'll have a transcendental experience, a spiritual experience, wherein you've met the criteria for the experience, which is the mastery, or the acquisition and the mastery of that state of inner peace, wherein then when the experience is given you, when you have earned the experience of your enlightenment, or any experience along the way that might be revelatory, it ensures that you're not at a stage or an immaturity of stages where you're going to corrupt that experience, and your ego will use it for further external validation and that sort of thing. So it seems to be a lot to master, but once you start to have internal shifts and you start to see how it is your mind actually works, you will gravitate towards the healing mechanisms of your processing, more than the externalizing of those mechanisms that want to convince you that you are being attacked, or that you need to defend yourself and all that sort of thing. So, the kingdom of heaven is within. Right, I love you. And from Point Arkwright, this is whatever it is that I am. Over and out.